Happy Fantasy Friday. It's time for book club. We are Lindsey,
Kelly,
and Katharine, and this is the Banter and Bookmarks podcast. Fair warning, this book club is not kid-friendly as we are discussing adult-themed books and use adult-themed language.
there will also be spoilers. If you haven't read the book, we will give you a spoiler-free introduction and review in the beginning and then warn you once we switch over to the spoiler zone.
So pour yourself a drink, come sit on the couch with us, and let's talk about books. Katharine, what are we talking about today?
We are beginning our deep dive of Quicksilver by Callie Hart. So excited. This is going to be an amazing series of episodes that we are pulling together for you guys. This is book one of the Fae and Alchemy series, and so far it's the only one published. The second book is going to be Brimstone. It's set for release on November 18th, 2025. Just get ready. It's on our calendars. We can't wait, but let's get into book one first.
This episode will give an overview of the world, the magic system, and the characters of Quicksilver before we dig into the book chapter by chapter over the next several episodes. It is the perfect episode for those who need a refresher or a recap before we really go in.
Literally already have book two marked in my calendar, in my planner. I'm so excited for it. So Kelly, give us a little spoiler-free summary from the back of the book.
24-year-old Sarah Sfain is good at keeping secrets. No one knows about the strange power she possesses or the fact that she has been picking pockets and stealing from the Undying Queen's reservoirs for as long as she can remember. In the land of the unforgiving desert, there isn't much a girl wouldn't do for a glass of water. But sooner or later, every secret comes out. When Sarah comes face to face with death himself, she inadvertently reopens a gateway between realms and is transported to a land of ice and snow. The Fae have always been the stuff of myth, legend, of nightmares. But it turns out they're real, and Sarah has landed right in the middle of a centuries-long conflict that might just get her killed. The first of her kind to tread the frozen mountains of Avelia in over 1,000 years, Sarah mistakenly binds herself to Kingfisher, a handsome Fae warrior who has secrets and nefarious agendas of his own. He will use her alchemist magic to protect his people, no matter what it costs him or her.
So I'm laughing over here so hard because Kelly was at my house earlier saying that she had been practicing how to say the phrase "a glass of water" without sounding too New York earlier.
What? Water?
So when
Water?
she said it during the summary, I was cracking up because water is so important in this book. And so we're going to make Kelly say water over and over and over in her New York accent. So you guys can just like have a little giggle every time you hear Kelly say water because we are doing it on purpose to mess with her.
A glass of water.
Glass of water.
You said water. That's Philly. I did live in Philly for a while, but
I got confused by another one of our neighbors.
So, ratings. So let's do a quick recap of our rating system here. A 5 bookmark rating at the Banter and Bookmarks podcast is that I absolutely loved this book, would give anything to capture the feelings for reading it for the first time. Those are those special books. A 4 is it's still really great. I really loved it, and it will probably be worth a reread eventually.
3 bookmark rating is I liked this book, but maybe not enough to reread, but you would recommend it. A number 2 is I'm not a fan of this book. Definitely, I'm not going to touch it again. Might even give it away.
And 1 bookmark would mean I probably didn't finish it, wouldn't recommend it, did not like it at all. Okay, I know what you guys are going to rate this because according to our rating scale, you guys literally did this to me because you said, Katharine, I am so happy for you that you get to read this book for the first time. I am so jealous. So I know every single one of us is about to put up 5 bookmarks.
And I will tell you, I have now reread this book several times, as I know Kelly has too, and it was just as good on multiple rereads as it was the first time. So that is 1,000% a 5 bookmark book.
She thick, so it's not like it's, a quick reread, but it was so worth it. I would read it again and again.
Like there's a reason why we're covering this book on our podcast as our first deep dive analysis, because we all love this book and we're so excited for the rest of the series.
And I'm so excited for Callie Hart. The author is just really blowing up. I'm so happy for her for being picked up by a publisher. She's the kind of writer that I just have so much hope for. And I think she has just potential to be even bigger than she is right now.
And shout out to Kelly, because I remember being at our pool last summer and you saying, Katharine, you need to read this book. You need to read this book. You need to read this book. And you would not stop talking about it. And you were very, very, very right.
Kelly got me to read it too.
Needed to.
We wanted to do a tandem read together. And she was like, I don't know. I keep seeing things pop up about this one. This maybe is the one we should do. And we devoured it. It was so good.
I'm so proud.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Let's dive in then. Fair warning, we are now entering the spoiler zone. If you do not want to hear spoilers, stop watching and come back later when you have completed the book. Now let's immerse ourselves in the realms of Zilvarin, the mortal city that Saris, our FMC, is from, and the other realm which Saris travels to, which is the home of many different magical creatures. Katharine, tell us about the mortal realm.
First thing I noticed when I started the book, and I immediately texted you guys, is we are presented with this city called Zilvarin. And there's a beautiful map in this book, which Kelly is going to get into a lot of details about in a minute. And I said, hey guys, why is Zilvarin not on the map? And they're like, trust the process, keep reading. So Zilvarin is the human realm. It's not on the map because this is the realm that Saris lives in, born in. And as Lindsey mentioned, the Fae realm is where she will be traveling to. It is a desert wasteland of a place. Water is the most precious commodity. There are 2 suns. It's always daylight, right? I got that right. It was always daylight. Yeah.
I can't believe that.
Yeah.
When I read that, I think because it's not really super explained, it's kind of just like randomly dropped in, just like a snippet. And you're like, wait, it's always daylight?
Always.
Yeah. Nonstop. Always
yes.
funny.
Exactly. There are wards in Zilvarin, kind of like districts, some nicer than others. Saris comes from the very worst of the ward, the quarantined 3rd ward. And I think there was one quote that probably summarized this place the best, which was a stinking wasteland of a place that is laid out like spokes on a wheel. You brought up something interesting, Lindsey, at the beginning and it's also right at the beginning of the book. It says Zilvarin, the great and shining banner of the north. But it's just a city. So we don't know a whole lot about Saris's home realm. All we know about is this one city in the human realm. So there's potential for more maps in our future, which I would love. But as of right now, Zilvarin is just one city in her world. And she knows there's trade to other places, but we don't really get exposure to any other cities or places in her world. So that would be fun.
I think the imagery of it being set up like spokes on a wheel is so cool too. Like my imagination runs wild with these towering walls. I mean, this wheel has to be absolutely massive with the tall, like 50 meters high walls. And like you said, and I don't think I'd really thought about that, is like we really only see her city talked about. So it's a huge place.
Yeah.
Yep. And when I was actually reading this book, it gave me very, very clear, vivid imagery of Eastern State Penitentiary. This is super, super random, but I lived in Philly for a while, and the state penitentiary that is in Philly, that is now a museum and you can go in, is also set up in the hub and spokes model. And so if you picture that, like the guard station was right in the center circle, and then each row of inmates was a different spoke on the wheel so that they can kind of watch down the line of what was happening. So that reminded me of this. I don't know if Queen Madra and her kingdom is in the center, but it kind of gave me this very ominous, whoever is in the middle can kind of easily watch out for all their different cities, always have an eye on someone. Like that it was a prison imagery in my head because it kind of feels like a prison to Saris. So I thought a lot about that.
So our main human character is Saris Fane, and it is confirmed pretty early on she has a drop of Fae blood in her. She's in her early 20s. She's very, very tall. Since she comes from such a horrible ward, she's had to be a bit scrappy in her life. She's a thief. She's also a very skilled fighter. I think they mentioned the fact that she's had a rotation of different rebels coming in and out of her house her entire lifetime, who basically taught her how to fight, which comes in handy later on. She's an apprentice to Elroy, a glassmaker, but, and I really, really thought this was cool, she can forge, like she can make swords. That's just not something very common, I feel like, in most stories that they give a female main character. And I kind of just liked that she was this badass metal forger, you know? And pretty early on, we can see there's something interesting with her and metals. I think it was probably right at the beginning, they said objects shake around me if they're made of tin or iron or gold. There's something going on with her and metals. And I also just kind of like that was a different gift. Next, we have Hayden Vane. This is Ferris's younger brother. When they were describing both characters, they're both tall, lanky, shared sense of humor, but where Ceres is dark-haired, Hayden is light. Where Ceres is pretty gritty, Hayden is a little bit immature. My impression I got of him is he still heavily relies on Ceres, and since their mother has passed, Ceres has kind of almost assumed that maternal relationship with Hayden. And it's funny, when I was reading some of this stuff on Hayden, I kept thinking, Lindsey, of how you described having a younger brother. And a lot of like what you prompted in our outline that we're reading here today, I could hear your voice describing your brother.
Oh, that's really funny. Like, I obviously wrote it as someone who was an older sister. That's really funny.
The last thing I would say about Hayden is that we get introduced to him at the very beginning and then nothing for the rest of the book. And because he was so immature at the beginning of the book, and I think the author said there's going to be 5 books total in the series, I can see him being a character where he's going to have a pretty big arc. I see him growing up. He doesn't have Ceres to rely on. So it's kind of a character I'm interested to see, because I assume she's going to at some point travel back to her human realm in later books. And I think she's going to find a younger brother who's not necessarily a younger brother anymore.
So do you think she's going to go back to Hayden, or do you think that Hayden is going to go to her? Like, is she going to go back to Zilvarin, or are they going to go back to Yavalia? Because I think they're going to go back to Yavalia together.
My take actually was maybe a little bit more combative.
Shocker.
I'm going to have to disagree with you on that one, Lindsey, as I always do. No, I think that they're going to go after the queen.
I agree with you that they are going to go back to Zilvarin. However, I think they're going to go back because I think Ceres is going to do some stuff to like set things right or save her people.
Yeah.
And I do eventually think that Hayden is going to join them in the Fae realm because of who she becomes at the end of the book. And I think she's going to have a certain level of responsibility. I think they're going to do both. I actually agree with both of you.
The next human character is my absolute favorite character of the whole book series, Carrion Swift. And he is not a main character in the book, but he is my favorite character. I wouldn't say he's a main character.
No, but I just realized too, I love that we put him in the human section because we start the book with him as a human, but he ain't human.
Nope.
But this whole book, he's considered.
I want a book with just Carrion because I love him so much. I think that Ceres described him perfectly. She said, the most notorious gambler, cheat, and smuggler in the entire city. He was also uncommonly good in bed. The only man in Zilvarin who'd ever made me scream his name out in pleasure rather than frustration. And that was a great line. I love that line. And finally, we have a male character who doesn't have dark black hair. He is a bright auburn hair. We have a ginger. I'm very, very happy that we've broken out of the every character has to have dark brown hair realm. So, I mean, he's introduced at the very beginning, and then we have a pause, and then he becomes a much more relevant character later in the book series. But even at the very beginning, I didn't hate him. He's literally introduced to us because Ceres is trying to find her brother, and Carrion has beat up her brother. And I kind of understand why he did do that. I think Carrion takes a lot of responsibility for the people in his ward and his city. And I think he's very, very protective of the ward. And so I get like little snippets of his personality, his character that made me just from the get-go really, really like him. And like I said, he's in the beginning, then we pause and come back to him. And we're going to go into a deep dive in a later episode. We're going to talk about a theory I had about Carrion. We all know Carrion is in this human section, but Carrion is not human. And I'm going to talk about what passage triggered that for me really early on. And I told those two, I was like, I have a theory, but I can't even look and talk to you guys right now because you're going to spoil it if I see you. And we're going to talk about that one in a later episode.
I was shocked because the first time that I read it, I did not get at all.
I didn't either. It totally threw me off.
Shocked that he was Fae. And now when I reread it, I was like, oh, okay, it was all there. But the fact that you picked up on that, that's good reading.
I was proud of her.
I was looking back on it, and there was another thing that probably should have triggered us sooner when they were talking about the heir that was left in Zilvarin. So the original king of Evalia, that family, there was an heir that was lost in Zilvarin. That probably should have triggered us a lot sooner. A lot of us probably thought it was Theris, to be honest. But yeah, that passage wasn't it. But when we get to I think it was chapter 20, there was just something that said, and I was like, he's a Fae. I knew it.
She's smarter than the rest of us.
All right, last human we're going to talk about. There are a couple more human characters, but the last major one, just to establish a baseline, is Queen Madra, the Undying Queen. She has reigned over Zilvarin for 1,000 years. Why she doesn't age, we don't know. But the point is, she is human, which will become much more important later down the road. Something also interesting, because they call her the Undying Queen. And so throughout the entire book one, nobody points out this as being weird. You know, her guard, her Captain Heron. When Kingfisher comes to the realm, he knows who Heron is.
I have so much to say about that when we get there. I have so much to say about that.
How about her guards, who are also undying and immortal as well? And nobody, I mean, we can talk about this, but nobody throughout the whole books references the fact that, why do you know a human who should have been dead 1,000 years ago? There's been no interaction between the realms for 1,000 years. How does Kingfisher know who Heron is? And that bothered me. And it's not addressed in the book. So that's going to be fun and exciting to see in the later book.
And Madra is in league with Malcolm, right? And Belicon. But if you think about it, if the portal's been closed for 1,000 years, you're telling me that they've still been in league with each other for 1,000 years without speaking or updating each other about their plans? Even though in the rules of the world that we currently know, Quicksilver is the only way to travel back and forth between realms, but it makes you wonder if there's either another way or the evil side has an alchemist that's been somehow allowing that. I just can't imagine as an evil queen 1,000 years later, I would still be on the same track with the same plan and not have gone rogue.
There's something else that we don't know. I worry actually that some of our favorite characters are going to end up having been part of something with the queen or been a part of helping her live. And there's some sneaky things afoot. And that worries me because I love so many of the characters, but it is all sneaky and I don't know what to think about it. And I think we're going to learn more
stuff there.
For sure.
Right.
There's some big plot holes, but I think it's purposeful.
And there's a lot of room for some backstabbing in there too from characters that we already like.
Because there wasn't a lot of backstabbing really in this book. Like no one.
Oh, that worries me.
I know. No one that I started to love in this book all of a sudden went negative. Like Carrie, and I was like, I like him. You're annoying, but I like you. And then all of a sudden I was like, Karen. So we have a lot of up and downs, I think, coming.
Oh, that worries me.
All right. Well, that wraps up our humans.
All right. So Kelly, tell us about the realm that Saris travels to, which is home to all these various magical creatures, including Fae.
We'll start with the map that I'll put up here on the screen. The map that is given to us, like Katharine was talking about at the beginning of the book, is a completely different realm than the human realm. This is where Saris travels to and where we spend the majority of the book. And this realm is broken into 4 regions. We have the Fae of Evalia and the Winter Court, the Vampires of Sanisroth, the Fae of Galaria, and the Autumn Court. Galaria is also, just to note, the home of the witches of the Balcahitter clan that we meet a lot later on in the book and become really important. And then there's a brief mention of other High Fae living in Lycia.
Kelly, something that was interesting because for the longest time, we're referring it to Evalia. It's not. We don't know the name of this world. The whole world, we don't know what this is called. It doesn't have a name yet, or at least that name is not given to us. And we know names are very important. So I found it very interesting. We didn't get the name of their world.
I just had a a
Light
boing light bulb. I don't know if I should say it for a later episode, but there's a line twice in the book where they talk about how important the Fae names are. When Ceres gets to Evalia, they're like, oh, Ceres, that's a Fae name. And then Kingfish later in the book that people have their Fae names that are not shared with others. And so now you're making me think, I wonder if it's not shared because the name of the realm is going to like lead us down to a plot.
Exactly. Like,
I have ideas. All right. I'm excited.
why wouldn't we get the name of the world?
Why?
It's weird.
So true. Okay. So let's talk about some of the high Fae characters. We have Kingfisher, who's a Fae. He is our male main character. If you watched our book boyfriend episode, he is in my top book boyfriends. He has these incredible green eyes with a little bit of Quicksilver swirling around in one. He is broody. He has great banter. We'll learn a lot about Kingfisher as the story goes on. And his tattoos. Chef's kiss. Chef's kiss. We have Everlane, who is also a Fae, and Everlane is Kingfisher's sister, which we learned very early on, but they can't speak very loudly about that.
Half sister.
Half sister. That's true. So Everlane is the daughter of Kingfisher's mother and King Bellicon. We have Renfis, who is also a Fae and one of Kingfisher's closest friends and part of his esteemed group of warrior fighters called the Lupo Paralia. We have King Bellicon, who is a Fae, and the King of Evelia. Don't like him. He is the king who forced Kingfisher's mother to leave her home, marry him, and produce him an heir, which she didn't do. And he's kind of the worst. We also have Malcolm. He is a vampire and the king of Sanisroth. He is very interesting because we know a lot in the book. We see a lot in the book about the blood curse. I think we're going to go into the blood curse a lot later in our deep dive. So I don't want to give too much away and talk too much about it now. But Malcolm is one of the very few who decided not to turn back. They found a cure for the blood curse, and that made him extremely powerful. The Fae were cursed for millennia. It was such a long time. And because he has had this blood curse in him still, for so long, he is extremely powerful, very evil, very creepy. Every time he enters a scene, I'm like, ooh, I get the heebie-jeebies. So we'll talk a lot more about that.
The blood curse is why all of the Fae, even those that are descended from those that took the cure, I think Kingfisher mentions it's his grandfather, great-grandfather took the cure, something around that time, which could have been literally thousands of years ago. But that's why they still have the canines.
The other thing that I had thought about is in a lot of fantasy books, we have a vampire versus werewolf situation going, that they are in the fantasy realm pretty much enemies. And I think it's interesting that the Fae all have the canine teeth, right? Like a vampire would. And we have Malcolm and we have the blood curse. And then Fisher's Hadrid is called the Lupo Proalia, which means his wolves.
And they have that wolf.
They have the wolf sigil. So I think that there might be some foreshadowing there. I think we might be onto something here about a much deeper werewolf versus vampire situation.
I agree. And I think that either Renfis or Lorith, who we haven't talked about yet, I could see them having some werewolf background. They're both like very big, very strong men. They have had some crazy things happen to them in the past, and that would be really awesome.
While I was reading this, I'm like, okay, cool. We've got Fae. We've got dragons that died out a long time ago. And then I'm chugging along and I'm like, okay, now we got vampires. Now we got vampires. What?
And with this,
pretty sure last year when Kelly and I read this together, I want to say one of us sent a text message to the other one that was like, vampires have entered the chat. Like out of nowhere.
Yep.
We've got vamps, guys.
There are vampires. We've got everything. And like you said, I'm so glad that you brought that up. The dragon, we know that Kingfisher slayed the last of the dragons. And on top of Bellicon,
Anum-Shakrai.
I'm like, the dragons are coming back, people. The dragons will be back. I feel it in my bones.
So yeah, Lindsey, why don't you tell us about all of these extra?
Other than dragons, we have a lot of sprites And actually, one of them is one of, I think, the most adorable characters in the book. So in the book, we hear mention of fire sprites, water sprites, air sprites, earth sprites. Carrie mentions a griffin sprite, which Katharine had made a note. She's like, I don't know what that would even look like.
That?
Like a tiny griffin? I don't know. So we'll let our imaginations run wild on that one. But Asher is one of my favorite little side characters. He's so cute. He is a fire sprite that works in Kingfisher's household from when Kingfisher was young and growing up. And Asher adores Kingfisher. I feel like Asher is really that first character that we see of other people really having a adoration of Kingfisher. And I think that he's intentionally there to soften Kingfisher's character in Sarris's eyes, but he is absolutely adorable. I think one of my favorite chapters of him is where he's carrying the books, and he carries the books like out like this because he's a fire sprite and he doesn't want to catch the books on fire. And I just think that's absolutely adorable.
Also, his reaction when he walks into dinner for the first time when Sarris is sitting on the side of Kingfisher, that indicates that she's the woman of the house. And we obviously don't know that yet. And his reaction, I picture him like, whoa, like,
yeah, I think he's adorable.
Yes.
He's so cute.
So cute.
So then we also have feeders, which are zombie vampires controlled by Malcolm. There's different levels to vampirism as we kind of get a little inkling as we get farther into the book here, but there are vampire lords, which still have all of their facilities and are separate and very distinct from the vampire feeders. So feeders really don't have any control over their emotions, and they never really, I don't think they ever actually refer to them as vampires. I think they just call them feeders. And so there's definitely a difference in levels there. And we'll kind of dive into that a little bit more as we go into our deep dive too. So, and then a couple more as Sarris ventures out into the realm, we do see a lot of different creatures. And I'm sure as we spend more time in the realm, we'll probably see them in a little bit more, a little bit deeper there. But we have pixies, we have dryads, we have brownies, satyrs, nymphs, fairies, Faeries, important distinction there. We have shades, which are kind of like ghosts is the way I read them. So there's a lot there that it'll be fun to kind of explore that as we dive deeper into Yvelia, I think. And then we get into the gods. So the gods, although it doesn't seem like the gods play an important role in the story at first, as the story goes on, the gods really, really come into play. And I think we're going to see a huge importance in the gods in further books, like starting book 2 and beyond. So again, we won't go into a lot of detail about each of the gods right now. As Sarris learns about them in our deep dives, we'll give more information. But basically, the humans don't worship the gods anymore. It is interesting that Sarris at one point realizes that her realm has twin sons, and the twin sons are named after the Fae gods. So there's definitely a crossover of culture there that we see, but the humans have no idea that it exists. But the Fae definitely still worship the gods. We'll dive into them later.
It was another funny crossover that she had. At some point she's reading and she's like, wait a minute, how do I know what you're saying? How do I know the words on this book? And she comes to realize that the Fae had used to come into her human realm. That's why she can speak the same common language as the Fae when she travels to Yvelia.
And it's basically because of Madra, right? Queen Madra has kept the Fae language in the human world, so she still speaks the same language as the Fae, and they don't even realize it.
But I kind of liked an author putting it in there because it's like, yes, why would I speak the same language if I'm traveling between realms? Like, I just kind of liked that she's like, let me close the loop on that one.
Let me make sure that none of you are on the internet being like, how can they speak the same language? Here it is. Here's
I don't
why.
want those comments.
Yeah.
We're just going to fix this.
But it is a deeper conversation about Madra herself, how she has kept so much of the Fae language goes. Like, she still names the sons after them or allows that, I guess, and still has them speak the same language for thousands of years. So she definitely still, and she, despite being mortal, is 1,000 years old. So it definitely shows how much of a respect for Fae culture she has that, again, the humans just are blindly unaware.
I think she clearly wants to be Fae, wishes she was Fae.
Oh, yeah. So then, Katharine, tell us about magic in the various lands. We do have a lot of different magic systems that we're introduced to.
So why don't we talk about the Quicksilver? It's the name of the book, after all, and the Quicksilver Gates. Quicksilver is a silver liquid metal thing.
It talks to us. It is rude and it is funny.
It is what allows travel between the realms. This is how Theros was able to travel from Zolvarin to Avelia. There was a Quicksilver pool in both locations, like a liquid metal portal. And it stated pretty early on that she must be an alchemist, since only alchemists can control the Quicksilver, and they're the only ones that could literally talk to the Quicksilver. And I think it's also stated around that same time that she clearly has to then have Fae blood in her because she is an alchemist. She could not be an alchemist if she did not have Fae blood somewhere down her ancestry. And I don't think, to the point that Quicksilver will literally talk to the alchemist, I don't think that Theros realizes early on that she actually can hear the Quicksilver. I think there's this scene at the beginning when she's trying to escape one of the queen's guardians, and all of a sudden this gold metal gauntlet, which she has stolen, starts talking to her. In my head, I have a voice for how the Quicksilver sounds. The line that she hears the first time that we become aware that the metal is talking to her, it's in my brain. It goes, she sees us, she feels us, she sees us, she feels us. It is literally, the aliens from Toy Story 2 when they're like, the claw. That is in my brain for the Quicksilver, but I didn't do the audiobook. So I almost don't actually want you to destroy it.
What does the audiobook sound like?
Sound like in the audio? Because that's what I'm hearing, and I honestly don't want it to change.
Because it's funny, Gollum to me. Yeah, it has that like scratchy Gollum voice to me. So what does the audiobook sound like?
Don't tell me it's a low voice.
So the Quicksilver in the audiobook is multiple voices. So Quicksilver
that makes so much sense.
A lot more sense.
It actually is great. So the narrator who voices Theros and all of the female voices, and then the narrator who does Kingfisher and all the male voices, both do a voice together and they say the same thing. And so it's like echoey and high-pitched female and low with the male. So it's very cool. It kind of feels like they're all around you when you're listening to it in the audio book. And I really loved it. It's not quite the Gollum or the little aliens, but I kind of love the idea of Gollum and the little aliens.
I would say we could probably consider the Quicksilver its own character.
Absolutely.
Right? It makes jokes. It likes jokes. It will make fun of you. If you camp on the Quicksilver to some kind of relic you're making, it will absolutely mock you.
Oh, she judges. It
also has opinions and standards, right? It took magic away from some of their god swords because it said the Fae were no longer worthy. So I think the Quicksilver, it's almost its own character. And because Lindsey and I think, have the same opinion on this, Kelly, I think you had a different opinion. We're going to get into a deep dive later about the gods and Quicksilver and how there might be some overlap between them later on.
And I also have a lot to say as we go further into the book, especially once we get to the end, about the connection between the things that the Quicksilver says and the Fae that Kingfisher doomed.
Oh,
so keep that in your brain for later, because I think there's a really deep reason why the Quicksilver keeps chanting Anarath more that is not really talked about, but there's a reason why it's saying that. So put that in your vault.
Yep.
For later episodes. And as we read and deep dive, I think it's important to look at as we go.
We will get unhinged.
Oh, we will get unhinged for sure.
So we were talking a lot about Quicksilver, alchemists. What is alchemy? What are the alchemists? So alchemy in this world is just a form of magic. by the time our story takes place, it is an old, long forgotten magic, dead magic. It's been gone for so long that it's literally a myth to the Fae that are currently living. The alchemists have all died out. We don't know why. There's no written accounts of the alchemist's process. It appears there was a lot of secrecy behind the alchemist magic, how it worked. And I did find it weird that nobody ever wrote anything down. And maybe it was that the alchemists would not allow their processes to be written down. But I found it so strange that in this world where people lived for so long, nothing about the alchemists was actually written down.
Or was it destroyed?
Yes, that's your scribe hat talking.
Ooh.
And then there are 3 branches of alchemy. And I'm only going to bring this up because of my opinions on Ceres's magic. So there's Fae that sought to discover the path to immortality. There are Fae that sought to create and invent by transmuting various metals and ores, and Fae that sought to cure illness and disease. And Ceres is very clearly number 2, but she also tries to pigeonhole herself into that second one. And I think it was Laura who mentioned this. It was when she literally exploded the sword into a bunch of different shards.
Anya's sword.
Yes. And he says, that makes you the most powerful alchemist ever recorded. And I think it's implied that you're not just this number 2 alchemy magic. There's something way more to her. Not only is she the most powerful alchemist any of them have ever heard of, but I think she will go eventually beyond just transmuting metals. I think there's more to her to come.
And let's go back to our favorite thing ever to talk about, which is Harry Potter, right? We obviously have a Nicholas Flamel situation here. He would be number 1. He would be the one that created the Sorcerer's Stone or the Philosopher's Stone, depending on where in the world you are, discover the path to immortality. And if you break it up, it's almost like the 3 types of alchemists are looking for different things. Like the first type was looking for life. The second type was looking for material things. And the third
cheat death
was looking to cheat death. Oh my God, we've got the Deathly Hallows, everyone. Whoa. Okay, I just blew my own mind there. That's not where I was going, but it's where I ended up. I just wanted to talk about Nicholas.
This is why we just have to keep talking to each other all the time.
Something else that's really important to know about Quicksilver is that it can drive you mad or kill you.
That is a very good point. Because what I did find interesting is that Quicksilver will only allow travel, right, if you are wearing one of those relics that apparently is supposed to protect the wearer and travel through the realms through the Quicksilver without the Quicksilver essentially invading your mind, causing you to go crazy. But does the Quicksilver ultimately kill you if it does do that? Because the only character we've seen it happen to was Heron at the very beginning of the book, the human in the human world. He's attacked by that Quicksilver knife. But then we see him again at the end of the book. So I guess, did we ever get a sense of, does the Quicksilver actually kill you, or does it just make you literally go insane perpetually?
Well, not to mention its effect on Kingfisher.
Yeah.
Himself, right? Like, I mean, you have to think he went through a pool of it.
Yes.
Right? Without a relic, which is something to talk about too, is that relics can safeguard you from the effects of the Quicksilver. And so he went through a Quicksilver portal without a relic, which is why he is driven mad, basically. And we learn that his grumpiness towards Ceres is largely attributed to the effects that the Quicksilver has on him.
They mentioned that happened pretty early in his life when he was forced to do that. He did not do that because willingly. The king made him do that. But he mentioned later on, because we do see he travels with Ceres back to Evalia, right? He's not wearing his relic at the time. And he mentions that he has trained his mind such that he can do that now. It's still very difficult for him. But I thought that was interesting that it's like you can almost get strong enough to train your mind to be able to travel through the Quicksilver without it making you go crazy.
And he does it again when he goes and gets Carrion.
Exactly.
When he thinks he's getting Hayden, but accidentally brings Carrion back. He gives Carrion his relic and he travels through without it. And the relics do become important, right? That's the whole reason that Ceres stays in Evalia, is to create relics for Kingfisher's people so that they can travel through Quicksilver without repercussion.
I actually have a theory about why Kingfisher can do that. I don't think, so I'm going to disagree with you, Katharine.
Love it. Now you can be the black horse.
No, I don't think that you can train yourself. I think Kingfisher can train himself because I think that Kingfisher, maybe it's his shadows, but I think that Kingfisher is more powerful than most others. I think that there's a lot of times that they call him Fisher King. They call him the king.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like there's something else going on with him that gives him more power. So I think that he can train himself to do those things, but I think it is rare and special. And I think we're going to find out more about him.
And that does bring up a good point of there's lesser magic throughout this entire world, right? You can turn the light on and off. You can move a chairs. I have clothes on, to quote Kelly, suddenly nude.
Immediately
nude.
Also, you can whisper sweet nothing
into your ear. Exactly.
That's hot.
Glamour.
Glamour.
Very important.
Fairy and glamour.
It does appear that some of the high fae have specialized magic, right? Kingfisher has shadows. He can travel through shadow gates. Renfist's power is a ball of exploding light that's really good against vampires, but we don't know if it's because they are themselves just very, very powerful. There are a lot of other high fae that we're not at least shown any powers that they might have. It's not to say they don't, we just haven't been shown them. So it'll be interesting to know, does every high fae get a specialized power, or to your point, Kelly, are only the most powerful able to do these extra things more than just normal lesser magic?
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting as the series goes on and we meet more high fae characters. The array of different types of magic that we get, I think is going to be really interesting.
There is one more character that we haven't talked about that I want to bring up, and that's Onyx, the little fox. Sarah finds this cute little fox in the forge.
It's gonna bite you.
Onyx is cute though, little white fox with little black tips. I love that she brought in this really cute little creature. I think Onyx is gonna like randomly show up with like cute little magic eventually. I don't know.
I think that Onyx is going to end up being a familiar. I think it's going to end up being a very witchy-like familiar character to Saris.
I love that theory.
We have witches. So it's interesting. We didn't talk about the witches, but we have witches.
I mean, honestly, we don't get a lot of description of if they are different or not. I'm assuming we have sprites and fae and witches, so I'm assuming they are a different. I don't think they're fae, but maybe they're descended. I don't think we really know.
I'm assuming that they look somewhat
they're humanoid.
Like fae.
They're humanoid.
They're humanoid. Yeah. But remember, when Saris is walking around the war camp for the first time, people immediately look at her and like, oh, she's a human because of her size, because of her ears. So that makes me think that even the witches, if they're not full fae, have to look a certain way because or else witches and fae would look.
They say, because we're spitballing. They say with the witches that they hadn't been seen for something like 100 years, right? So maybe it's that the witches are also just at this point just as mysterious to a lot of them. There's so many characters, so much lore, so much world to dive into. This is going to be so fun.
Yeah. And again, this is like we did this episode just because we wanted to kind of touch on things. So for people that haven't read the book yet and you're following along with us, hopefully this kind of gives you an introduction into the world. And then for those that have, just kind of a quick reminder of what the magic systems are, who our characters are. And we cannot wait to dive into these chapters with you guys. It's going to be so much fun. So join us next week, unless there's anything else we feel like we didn't cover.
I think we're ready to go. Let's dive in.
No unhinged theories. We want to.
No, this allows us to be unhinged in the rest of the episode.
Oh, yeah. Join us for next week's Fantasy Friday, where we are going to dive into Quicksilver chapter by chapter. Next week, we are covering chapters 1 through 5 of the book. So either catch up on that set of chapters or don't read it all and follow along with this anyways, because it's going to be a fun ride. And we are going to go in so much depth that you will feel like you've read the book.
And please If you have unhinged theory, please shout
Let
it
us
out to
know,
us.
for
We
sure.
want to know about all the unhinged theories. Those are our
Send us an Instagram message at Banter and Bookmarks. We would love to hear it. Tag us in your posts. Let's communicate. I can't wait. I want to hear it all.
All right. Until next Fantasy Friday. Bye, guys.
happy reading.